Thank you very much. Joanne has done an outstanding job in terms of representing the views and opinions of the people here in Idaho. You know, people are unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered, but love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives, but do good anyway. If you are successful, you win false friends and true enemies, but succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow, but do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable, but be honest and frank anyway. People favor underdogs, but follow only top dogs. Fight for some underdogs anyway. And what you spend years building may be destroyed overnight, but build anyway. And people really need you, but may attack you if you help them. But help people anyway. And give the world the best you've got, and you'll get kicked in the teeth. But give the world the best you've got anyway. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot tell you how much of a pleasure it is to be here with you, people who are getting things done. I come to you from a perspective that the global status of a child's right to an education is, in fact, a global human rights issue of our time. Because world peace, regional peace, religious harmony, cultural understanding, economic development toward the eradication of poverty, and the ushering in of economic independence, all are byproducts of an educated global community. As Joanne mentioned, I am the vice president, one of 6 vice presidents of Education International. And I must tell you, from the perspective that I have had and the experiences that I have had, education is a key component to all human rights issues of our time. It's amazing what happens when you go to different places in the world and you see students and you see educators and you see the communities in which they live. I was in Ghana last May, and a lot of times I just go places. People try to direct me to places where they want you to go. I want to go to places where I want to go. I want to see how the people live. I walked into this school, and I walked into the room, and all of the kids stood up. They said, "Welcome, sir." I said, damn. I said, shoot, let me turn around and walk out and do this again. And when I turned around, they all stood up again and said, "Thank you, sir." I said, damn. And I walked in again, and they said, "Welcome, sir." Can you imagine walking into any of our classrooms and the young people getting up and say, "Thank you, sir"? Or when you leave out, they say, "You're welcome, sir." I would submit to you that if, in fact, we had a little bit more respect from our students, from our parents, from our policymakers, from educators, this would be a much better world, my friends. And you know what? It doesn't cost a dime to be nice to somebody. You see, I believe that you should always, always extend a helping hand to somebody. You see, my mama taught me you don't kick on the way up who you might meet on the way down. And so as a result, I don't care who it is. I don't care where it is. I am constantly out there trying to make a difference in the lives of people, regardless of whether it is here in the States or whether it is internationally. And I know that you do the same. But the one thing that I have seen here as well as abroad, it is so painful, and that is education under attack. Across the world, you have assassinations, kidnappings, disappearances, illegal imprisonments, torture, mass poisoning, acid attacks, sexual assaults, forced recruitment as soldiers or suicide bombers, rocket and mortar attacks, gunfire, aerial bombings, burning, looting, all of these forms of violence have been perpetrated. All of these have been perpetrated on teachers, students, school support professionals, school and universities over the past few years. In situations of armed conflict and insecurity, deliberate attacks and threats against learners, academics, teachers, teacher unionists, and education facilities are both a barrier to the right to get an education and a basic denial of the right of life and liberty. These violations, these violent incidents and violations involve the use of force in ways that disrupt and deter educators from providing education to students, putting educators and learners at risk in environments that should be safe and secure and protective. In 2000, 185 governments made a commitment to achieving the Education for All goals by 2015. Education International was one of the strong advocates for this, along with the Global Campaign for Education, for decisive commitments by governments to promote full and equal opportunities for quality public education for all. Wherever attacks on education and educators occur, the realization of these Education for All goals is going to be extremely difficult to attain. Attacks on educators, attacks on education, they are a grave concern and a rising concern. They include violations of multiple provisions on international humanitarian and human rights laws, including the rights to life and liberty, the right to education, the protection of civilians and civilian objects during conflict, and the rights to freedom of expression and association. Attacks on education occur most often in conflict areas and involve the use of threats or force in ways that disrupt the provision and the providing of good education for all. And they are actively doing things that hurts individuals providing these educational opportunities. Worldwide, over 40 million children are missing out on primary schools in conflicted areas. Many of these states are very, very fragile. Many are due to direct attacks on learning spaces, attacks on their teachers, and sometimes even attacking the learners. And many more academics, older learners, trade unionists, Ministry of Education staff, and humanitarian personnel are either directly or indirectly affected by those abhorrent conditions. Attacks on education also occur widely outside of situations of armed conflict in countries experiencing political instability, insecurity, and repression. In 2007 and 2010, UNESCO commissioned Education Under Attack, a global study of targeted political and military violence against students, teachers, academics, education workers, and facilities. The second volume, Education Under Attack 2010, suggests forcefully that attacks constitute a major international problem for local communities, national governments, international donors, policymakers, and all of those concerned with promoting educational opportunities. Let me give you some examples of some things that happen in some countries. As an example, countries where attacks on education and educators has intensified dramatically would be Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Thailand. The latest numbers that we have demonstrate that attacks on schools, students, and staff nearly tripled in Afghanistan from 2007 to 2008, up from 242 to 670. In Pakistan, 356 schools were destroyed or damaged in one small region at the center of a battle between the army and the Taliban. In India, nearly 300 schools were reportedly blown up by Maoist rebels between 2006 and 2009. In Thailand, the number of attacks on schools quadrupled between 2006 and 2007 to 164, fell back a little bit in 2008, although the killings of teachers, students, and security escorts for teachers. Security escorts. Teachers having to be escorted in order to go to a place of work that is supposed to be safe for them to teach and for students to learn. In Somalia, 144 schools were closed in August of 2007 due to attacks and threats, and in the first half of 2009, 42 were occupied or shelled. Very high numbers of attacks during short military operations in Georgia and Gaza also were reported. In Georgia, 127 education institutions were destroyed or damaged in 2008 of August. In Gaza, more than 300 kindergarten, schools, and university buildings were damaged or severely damaged in 3 weeks during Israel's Operation Cast Lead at the turn of 2008 and 2009. Folks, these are catastrophic environments. Catastrophic environments in which people live, certainly disastrous environments for children to learn and educators to work. Here in America, there's a tax on teachers, but here in America, we often can't imagine what is meant by targeting teachers in the global context. Educational institutions of all levels are suffering from an increasing trend of violent attacks which take the form of arrest, bullying, torture, kidnapping, injury, even murder of teachers and academics and education unionists. Today, more than ever before, teachers and students are not only vulnerable to attack, but increasingly are attacked. There's some new trends that we have discovered in terms of these attacks. Direct killing of groups of students, mass poisoning of students, recruitment as suicide bombers, kidnapping armed gangs and groups, occupation of schools and attacks in narco wars, education aid workers being targeted. Folks, it is absolutely amazing what happens in different parts of the world. Sometimes when I go out, I'm absolutely amazed at how some people can actually work and how some students can actually learn in conditions in which they are expected to thrive. I got to take my hat off to you. You know why? Because in many instances, folks, you are doing things that people should be doing but are just sitting back and allowing things to happen. But that's not you. You stand up and you stand for what you believe is right. And because of that, because of what you have done and what you will continue to do, there are so many people that may not even know now what is going to be or what they are going to be beneficiary to. And the only thing that I ask you to do is to continue that work and bring more people into it, starting with those that are young. It is everybody's responsibility to make sure that the people in our countries have what they need in order to be successful. And the one thing that is the common denominator, a common thread, is education, whether it is in this country or whether it is in some foreign country. I have a lot of other stuff that is very interesting, but I think you get the picture. Sometimes we believe that we have it easy, or no, sometimes we believe that we have it hard, and that what happens here, nobody else can deal with. Ethiopia is another one of the countries. It's rough, folks. I went over there on a mission, and the person that I went there for, it was 6 of us from across the world. We went there in hopes of trying to get the government to recognize the union as the group that they are, which is a group of trade unionists who are concerned about the education of teachers, education of kids. You see, a lot of times people think that because you are a union, you are not caring about those things that are important to kids. But I would tell you this, it makes it much easier for a strong unionist to be able to provide strong services because of the support that they know they have from their union. And that's what many across the world have or want. Many organizations, they come to the Education International asking for us to send letters to their governments, sending letters to their governments such that they will be able to ease the pressure that's on them in their respective countries. In Ethiopia, again, we went there. We went all over. We visited the organization that the government had set up in place of our organization. We visited the diplomat, U.S. diplomat. We visited other trade unionists. But in the end, nothing happened. And I'm told that it's even worse now. The person that we went over there for, about 2 years later, he ended up in jail. Spent 6 years in jail. He got out, came back to the United States where he went to school, and then they had new union leaders to take over. You know what? Many of them were imprisoned. Some of them were killed. It's amazing. We think that we have it rough. I also have gone to Liberia to do some work. Went across the country to Sanaquili. Man, it was something. You know, sometimes how we complain about the United States, sometimes we say the United States is the worst place in the world. I have gone places and have been so glad to get back home because I know what I can and cannot do. Some of the educators, if in fact they utter a word that is different than what the government wants, bow. At the Congress that Joanne talked about, we will have a Congress in South Africa. We have it every 4 years. Many times the people who are delegates, they get up to speak, and we think they don't have anything to say. But you know why they're speaking? They're speaking there because if in fact they are not allowed to speak there, they will never have a place to speak. Amazing. And then we come home, and we are able to do practically what it is we want to do. So folks, sometimes you think that what happens in other parts of the world doesn't impact you. But if in fact you believe that, I have a little story I want to tell you. And it's called the mousetrap story. Once upon a time, a mouse looked through the crack in the farmhouse wall to see the farmer and his wife opening a package. What food could it contain, the mouse wondered. He was shocked to discover that it was a mousetrap. So retreating from the farmyard, the mouse proclaimed the warning, "There's a mousetrap in the house, a mousetrap in the house." The chicken clucked and scratched, raised her head and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Mouse, I can tell that this is of grave concern to you, but it is of no consequence to me, and I cannot be bothered." The mouse turned to the pig and told him, "There's a mouse trap in the house, a mouse trap in the house." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Mouse," the pig sympathized, "but there's nothing that I can do about it but pray. And please be assured that you are in my prayers." The mouse turned to the cow. She said, "Like, wow, Mr. Mouse, a mouse trap? Like I am in danger? Not." And so the mouse returned to the house, head down and dejected, to face the farmer's mousetrap alone. And that very night was the sound of a mousetrap catching its prey. The farmer's wife rushed to see what was caught. And in the darkness, she did not see that it was a venomous snake whose tail the trap had caught. The snake bit the farmer's wife. The farmer rushed her to the hospital, and she returned home with a fever. Now, everybody knows you treat fever with fresh chicken soup. And so the farmer took his hatchet to the farmyard for the soup's main ingredient. His wife's sickness continued so that friends and neighbors came to sit around the clock. To feed them, the farmer had to butcher the pig. The farmer's wife did not do so well, and a few days later she passed away. And so many people came to the funeral that the farmer had the cow slaughtered to provide meat for everybody to eat. So the next time that you hear that someone is facing a problem and you think that it does not concern you, remember that when there's a mousetrap in the house, the whole barnyard is at risk. And I'm saying to you right now, my friends, I'm saying to you right now, whether it's here in this country or whether it's abroad, there's a mousetrap in the house. And folks, if we don't do something about it, the whole barnyard is going to continue to be at risk. So you have to continue to stand up and speak out. Stand up and speak out. Remember something that Eleanor Roosevelt said when she said that nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent. Do not allow anybody to make you feel inferior. And remember what Langston Hughes said when he said, "What drives me crazy may have no impact on you, but I'm going to keep saying it till it drives you crazy too." So just keep saying it, folks. Keep saying it. And remember something that Dr. King said when he said, "Our lives will end the day we become silent about things that matter." And if, in fact, you don't believe anything or remember anything that I've said this evening, I know all of you probably have heard of the great fighter, Muhammad Ali. You see, there was this fighter that thought that he could beat Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali found out about it, and he approached this fighter and told him that if you dreamed that you could whoop me, you better wake up and apologize. And so I'm saying to you, my friends, there are going to be those that want you to stop doing what you do. You tell these suckers they better wake up and apologize. If, in fact, they believe that you're no longer going to be concerned about the rights of individuals, you tell them they better wake up and apologize. They say that if, in fact, you continue to have these fifth graders know a little bit about what goes on in the world as it relates to king, hate, and so forth, and they want to stop it, you tell them they better wake up and apologize. And if, in fact, they think that you are no longer going to continue to draw in all aspects of the community, from the colleges and the students and other members of the community, you tell these suckers they better wake up and apologize. And so I'm saying to you, my friends, it is rough out here sometimes. And sometimes people will try to prevent you from doing what is right and doing what needs to be done. But stand up and speak out. Because if it's not you, then who? And if not now, then when? You can do that, my friends. And when you do, sometimes people are going to try to put you down. They're going to try to say that you're not worthy. They're going to try to say that you're losers. But remember that if you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you'd like to win, but you think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't. Life's battles don't go to the swifter or faster person, but sooner or later, the person who wins is the person who thinks they can. I think you're winners, my friends. I think you're winners. But you know what? It doesn't matter what I think. It's what you think. Because I tell my kids all the time in the audiences, if your mind can conceive it and you believe it, you can achieve it. You can achieve any and everything that you want. You don't believe that? Look at what you've done, man. Look at what you have done over the years. You have stepped up and you have stopped things. Stopped people. Right, Tony? Stop people from doing things that were not right. But people still try to put you down. So I'm going to close with this poem by a 16-year-old, and it's called The Cold Within. 6 humans trapped in happenstance in bleak and bitter cold. Each one possessed a stick of wood, or so the story's told. Their dying fire in need of logs, the first one held his back. For of the faces around the fire, he noticed one was black. The next man looking across the way saw one out of his church and couldn't bring himself to give the fire his stick of birch. The third one sat in tattered clothes. He gave his coat a hitch. Why should he bring his logs to use? Why should he put his logs to use to warm the idle rich? The rich man just sat back and thought of wealth he had in store and how to keep what he had earned from the lazy, shiftless poor. The black man's face bespoke revenge as the fire passed from sight. For all he saw in his stick of wood was a chance to spite the white. The last man of this forlorn group did not accept for gain. Giving to those who gave was how he played the game. Their logs held tight in death still's hand was proof of human sin. They didn't die from the cold without. They died from the cold within. I'm saying to you, my friends, people will try to put you down. People don't like what it is that you do, but enough do so that you are able to do what you do here. You got these young people. Don't lose them. Bring these young people along. You have other folks that are here working to make sure that your goals and your objectives are realized. And working together, my friends, I know that you can be successful. Not only for today, but for tomorrow and the next day. And when you do everything that needs to be done, don't leave me hanging here, girl. All right. Where's my man at over here? When you do things that need to be done, people are not going to like it, man. But you know what? It is very difficult for people to stop a group, stop a movement of people. That's what you got here. You got a movement of dedicated, committed people, dedicated and committed to a cause that talks about eradicating hate and doing away or minimizing violence. And you got the newspaper man right with you there, all right? And so, folks, when it gets down to whether or not you can continue to be successful, always remember that it's going to be very tiresome at times. And at times, you're not going to know whether or not you're going to be successful. Folks, I've been in this business a long time. And you know what? Sometimes I get tired. And sometimes I fall down, and I don't know, Tony, whether I can get back up again. But Judge, you know what? I get back up again. I get back up again so that I can continue to fight these suckers with every ounce of breath that I got. And you know what, folks? That's what you do. You fight these suckers with every ounce of breath you got. And that is absolutely you don't know whether or not you can get back up. But if in fact you ever get to the point where you don't know whether you can get back up again, I want you to remember one thing. And that one thing is when things go wrong, and they sometimes will, and when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile, but you have to sigh, when care